Hello, everyone. My name is Koray Tuberkubur, and today I am a part of an excellent group. And here we have many lovely speakers with me. I will be a host, and I can tell that I am not experienced for being a host. If I do something in a wrong way, please forgive me. So you know my name already. It is already in the screen, and probably you have seen a couple of case study from it, maybe if I am lucky. And I have an agency which is called Holistic SEO and Digital. I focus on mainly the semantics, but also other verticals of the search. And I try to do SEO A/B tests while spamming the search engines, or let's say testing, as Down Anderson says. And I try to just understand the search engines. And now I believe Crystal will introduce herself.
Thank you very much. I'm really pleased to be here. My name is Crystal Carter. I am the head of SEO communications at Wix, and I am a technical SEO. I work with clients doing technical SEO. I work with Wix doing technical SEO, and I like to talk to people about different elements of SEO and how we can all make SEO accessible to everyone. So I'm really happy to talk to everyone today and to learn from the fantastic panel.
And now, Andrew.
Thanks, Corey. Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew. I'm based in Cambridge in the UK. I'm an SEO consultant. I have my own company called Optimize. I used to be a journalist in a former life, so I'm kind of interested in this whole kind of content side of SEO. I mean, I focus in my consultancy more on the technical side, but yeah, I kind of have a special place in my heart for good content. So I'm particularly interested in the topics we're going to talk about today.
And now, Sarah.
Hey everyone, I'm Sarah. I've been doing SEO for over 8 years. I've worked with small businesses and enterprises. I'm also an ex-startup founder, and I like making complex SEO concepts simple, and I'm happy to be here today.
Okay then. So before the beginning, I will explain a couple of things for the SEO ranking. And the first thing that I want to tell that before the SEO is being called as SEO, it was actually search engine ranking, which is the first name of the search engine optimization. That's why I really like the SEO ranking name, which is one of the greatest names for SEOs. And SEO ranking is actually an all-in-one SEO platform, and they just don't track your rankings. They actually do way much more things than that. And I would suggest you to try their free trial. At the same time, I also suggest to the brand that it shouldn't be a free trial. I can tell you can at least pay like $1, $2 for the trial, because in my experience, when people pay, they actually try harder. So at least even if you don't pay, just try harder, because you will find great benefit from the technology here. Okay. And yes, there are many great rewards here, awards. I can't even count how many, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It doesn't end. And also I can tell that it has a great design too. And I like the dark mode there as well. So now we can dive into our topic. And actually, I want to start with Andrew a little, because you said that you are actually a journalist, or you were a journalist. And I just wonder, while you were a journalist, did you use the keyword density at all?
Yeah, so in my former life as a journalist, I didn't really know anything about SEO at all. Like I was fresh out of university and writing content. I was getting paid to watch sport. It was just like the greatest job I'd ever had. And SEO wasn't even on my radar at all until something, I can't remember, something, but it's like, I think some sports star died, and then we had to change this story because they were really ill. And then we changed this one word in the headline, and the traffic went crazy. And I couldn't work out why. And it was like, all right, what's happened? Like my editor was really pleased. It was like something happened, and it all came back to like this super nerdy guy in the corner said, oh, it's something to do with SEO and like Google, and all these words flew over my head. But that's that kind of first seed was first planted of the difference that choosing one word between this person's really ill and now suddenly this person's dead. And because that's what happens now. Everybody, whenever anybody's celebrity, their name trends on Twitter, everybody goes, oh, they must be dead. So they Google like, is Tom Hanks dead? Is, Amber Heard dead? That's all the thing all the time. So that's how that kind of stuff started to come around. And that first seed of like, oh, okay, that difference between X celebrity is ill, X celebrity is dead.
Yeah,
it's horrible. I mean, that's a really nasty example, but like the difference between those kind of like words between and how much difference that makes.
Yeah, and
That
I
was
can
really
tell it's
interesting.
one of the really spammy industries too, because every day I see many different web pages that come like X person is that, or the X person service, X person obituary, and these type of things.
Mm-hmm.
And they still rank actually, Andrew. Why do you think that they rank that well? Even if they tell completely wrong information? Because, for example, Crystal, you can answer that too. If Google understands the content or the sentences, the other day, for example, I won't tell the name because when I say I got emotional and I want to continue to do a smile, but we lost a great mind. And at the same time, there was many news there. And on this news, it was saying that the children of X, the wife of X, but there is no children or the wife from the person at all. They just write gibberish content for ranking, and also they rank. So do you think that Google checks the accuracy before ranking?
In my opinion, I think sometimes Google uses a lot of signals to rank content. So I think sometimes, particularly when something's hot off the press, it's easier to rank with something that's less accurate. Just because Google's retency particularly for news is a factor. So if a news breaks, I don't know if there's a hurricane or something and like it's just touched ground, the first news that comes out about that will be relevant, will have some relevance in that, and that retency will be important, even if it's not all of the best details of it. Like any news from the beginning, it will be useful. So I think that retency will affect, but I've seen it before where I've had clients who were responding to a bit of content, a change in law, and they were the first ones to write something on it. And they were they were perfectly reputable, and the content was accurate, but they were outranking the government website because the government hadn't written anything on it yet. And they when as soon as the government updated their content, then they weren't outranking them anymore. So Google's constantly updating, they're constantly crawling, they're constantly updating their index and things like that. So I think that when things happen straight away, there's various different factors. I think retency will come into it. Obviously, like the keywords will come into it, the NTTs will come into it, the overall accuracy, or the overall perceived accuracy of the source will also come into it. Just like a bloke says down the pub, if you know the bloke from down the pub normally gives you decent information about what happened down the market the morning before, then like you'll probably believe him, even if it sounds a little bit implausible. You'll check it later, but
Yeah.
I think that those sorts of things come into play. There's a lot of different factors, as you know.
Thank you. But today I am here for asking the questions rather than the answering. So in my opinion, you think that Google actually ranks according to the maybe a little the co-occurrence of the words and a little the continuous back of the words. But at the same time, they check the accuracy and details maybe way much later. And that's why for these fresh queries, the trending queries, suddenly trending queries, they are able to rank because they are published new, and they just target that area, and they use really similar phrases that appear in other types of documents, because I believe for the last 20 years, all of these pages include the same type of words all the time. So I guess Google doesn't have a time for checking whether X person has a girl or wife or not. And it will be a little in a kind of privacy issue too, I guess. But
yeah, well, I think that's a really good example of something that, like, particularly, I think the person if I'm thinking of the person that you're thinking of, it might be that there isn't any way for them to corroborate that information. They might not have any way to check. Like if you were to say whether or not Queen Elizabeth has a husband or has children or things, there's plenty of evidence and there's plenty of things online for them to be able to check that information. But if you were to ask Google if my aunt Julie has a husband or wife or a cat or a dog, they wouldn't be able to corroborate whether that's true or false. So I think that can depend. And I think also something important to think about is that Google says all the time, I think the number they normally throw out is like 15% or something. 15% of searches have never been made. So they don't have the relationships established, like to necessarily make more of an educated decision until there's a sort of dearth of content.
Definitely.
May I add is that sometimes because the query is relatively fresh, right? When someone adds something that hasn't been mentioned in other content online, maybe that would push Google to favor it a bit, because this is like a new piece of information that wasn't. Yeah. But I mean, there are other factors, but that's one way to look at it.
Yeah. Okay. I also wanted to ask you something, Sarah. Did you think that Google ever used the keyword density at all for the beginning, from the beginning, since the beginning?
Potentially in the past, potentially, but now I don't think so.
So when do you think that they stop using it?
That's a tough one. So, like, at least in the couple, like 3-4 years, I don't see it as, you know, I see it as less and less important. But there is one thing I need to clarify. When we talk about keyword density, it's different when how we pass those recommendations to copywriters, because we still need to communicate.
Yeah.
We need to add the keywords and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay, so I will ask one more question, and you all can answer, by the way. And do you think that keyword frequency and keyword density, are they same thing?
I remember back in the day when people would, like, I don't know, if you were to do a web page about sandals, and it would be, it had, you know, title sandals, H1 sandals, like, and then they'd be like, sandals are great. I love sandals. Sandals are my favorite type of sandals. Sometimes I wear one sandal, sometimes I wear 2 sandals. The sandals that I have are my favorite sandals in the whole wide world. And then at the very bottom of the page, there'd be like sandals in Greece, sandals in Portugal, sandals in Spain, sandals in this, and like all of these different things. That was a thing. And it sounds crazy, but those pages did rank.
Yes.
Right. We've all seen them. So that I think is and that I think like that's a frequency thing.
Okay.
If you're to talk about like keyword density, I think now keyword density has to do with richness and with like relevance and stuff. So if you were, for instance, you were to talk about sandals, you could say like, you know, sandals are a type of footwear that you would wear that it would, you know, show your toes. There are lots of different types of sandals. Some have platforms, some have wedges, like some have this, that, or the other. And it would be important if you were talking about shoes and you were specifically selling sandals to say that.
When I was reading one of the, and the inventor is Anna Petter in the Venture AI, she was telling that if one is using many gibberish things, like as in your example, but also she says that if document has high page rank, they tell that we shouldn't punish it, because probably even if it is a little gibberish, even if it uses many things, the page rank should show the truth. So do you think that this is still the situation? Do you think that page rank is a kind of safe exit from this type of spam or old ways? Any of you can answer, by the way. Was it hard or you can speculate, by the way. It's a free thing in SEO.
I mean, I think that sometimes people do those like clunky SEO things, but sometimes they still have something that's decent. The one that I can think of was somebody who was doing photo boxes. That's the last time I saw that sort of thing. And it was like party photo boxes, and they were selling photo boxes, and they were a perfectly legitimate company. Their SEO just was like a little heavy-handed, you know. And so I think that Google has lots of different signals to understand whether or not the page or the business or the service is actually of use to users. And so I think they're trying to make the internet more accessible for businesses who maybe don't have sophisticated SEO. I think like package ranking is a tool that they're using for that as well. And so I think that maybe that's what the not punishing people for it is that like if we are getting lots of signals that people are converting, people are booking and things like that, then it can be useful as well if other people want to come in.
Okay.
I think so. I have a kind of interesting example around that. It kind of goes back to the sandals thing. So there was a client of mine that worked in recruitment, and they had lots and lots of jobs in various cities around the UK. And they had this kind of SEO content on all these pages about, I don't know, so it's jobs in Manchester. And it'd be, you know, blah, 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 about all these jobs in Manchester that were particularly live, that they were recruiting for at the time. And then they'd have this spiel at the bottom about Manchester is a city in the northwest of England, and it's near Liverpool, and it has 2 football teams. Just nothing to do with recruitment and jobs and stuff at all, but just garbage content that they pretty much scraped from Wikipedia. Some SEO had told them it was a good idea to do. And it's like, okay, so is that hurting them? Should Google punish them for doing lousy SEO? Probably not. Like, there's the gem of the content is still in there. It's good, right? If you're looking for a job in Manchester, hey, they got it. They've shrouded it in a whole cloud of garbage, but the gem is still in there.
Definitely. So, I believe Anna Patterson also agrees with you, because she also says that there is something called phrase rank, and they tell that if there is a high page rank, the document should be quality, and it means that actually our algorithms is a little shady in this context. And I also remember that there is one concept that passes from Anna Patterson to the new level or new generation of search engine algorithms like BERT or the others like MOM, and it is called attention span. Do you know what it is, or should I just define it in a small way? Okay. So in a simple way, the attention span is a kind of window that will just check the word sequences, because as you see, the Microsoft or Google, they always try to show off by saying that we had used like 300 billions of parameters. The other one says that I used 4 trillions. So the other one says that I have 5 trillions. So it always continues. The number is always increasing. And the parameter there, actually, it means that any kinds of word seconds. So they put an attention span and they use it like this in the document, and they always take a snapshot from a connection to another connection. And then they realize that actually after a certain types of word, another certain type of word will appear. And usually according to that, there will be a specific lemma, stemming, and also there will be a specific part of speech tag. And based on that, they are able to generate text, or they are able to understand whether you write the document or whether you use AI, whether it is original or not. So my question here is actually a little about the attention span, because from keyword density to the NLP, slowly we should make a transition here. And if you would need to instruct some of the authors and you need to teach them NLP, and I know that there are many SEOs here who listen us, and I believe they try to learn, but I believe they also complain about the authors sometimes, because even if they try to teach these things to the authors, usually the copywriter uses their own traditions. So do you have any kinds of methodology for training an absolute beginner for NLP copywriter, let's say?
I think it. Can I go?
Yeah,
I think it starts when you create the brief or the content framework, and obviously you need to have a lot of communication. But what I usually do, I list like the keywords I need, and then I list how I expect them to be there. But then I also tell the copywriter they have a lot of flexibility. Like, these are not like rigid rules, like having them 2-3 times or that sort of thing. But that's just a suggestion, so they wouldn't sort of skip them at all. So this is how I start, basically.
Okay, for that. Andrew, you're a funny person. I believe you will train authors in a really good way.
In a funny way? I hope so. I hope it's fun. Yeah, as a former writer myself, then you can sometimes get these briefs from SEO folk who say like, oh, you need to write an article about sandals, and hey, you need to mention sandals, and you're like, come on, like I'm a professional writer. This is just insulting. So I find that a good way to then show them like the results and to show them competitors. So I think, we're probably going to come and talk about all this kind of stuff later, but it's a bit like, right, okay, if you're going to write about sandals, and Crystal kind of nailed it earlier when it's a bit like, okay, what else? What are the other entities, we're going to come to those, around sandals that people are going to be looking for? If you don't mention feet, and you don't mention buckles, and you don't mention shoes, and you don't mention like open toes, and you don't mention beaches, and all this kind of stuff, you're probably not that thorough on sandals. And like, so for a journalist, they're going to go, well, of course I do that. And like, but it's like, sometimes just, okay, look, of course you're going to do that because you're a good writer and you're going to research your content thoroughly, and you don't need me as an SEO telling you, but here's some competitor content. Look at what they've done. They're currently ranking number. This is who we're going for. They're number 1 at the moment. They've nailed this. As far as Google is concerned, this is the number 1. And you're better than that. I know you are. Come on. So then here's what we're going to do. And we're going to cover and it's just, and they, of course they're never going to go, I'll tell you what, I could never have done my job without you in SEO. You're such a great person. You've made my life better. But the content will be better, and then you'll get a little bit of the kind of halo effect of the credit, that kind of stuff. So showing them competitor content, showing them what good ranking content looks like, if you can find good examples. If you don't find, the examples you were talking about earlier, where hey, ranking number 1 is sandals, 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 by the sandals. And
All
you don't
types.
show that. That's going to make them want to hurt themselves and lie in a dark corner.
And do you think that?
Good stuff. So.
Sorry, do you think that it is a situation for every language? Because sometimes I hear one of the SEOs from another country, they say that the Google NLP or Google Natural Language Understanding, it works for English, but not for XYZ languages. We still see old-fashioned content ranks really well. What do you think about it, Sarah?
So this is not for me to talk about because I struggle with English. So I'm going to leave it to all you people who are doing this webinar in like your second or third language. This is your bit.
I actually wanted to follow up on Andrew's comment first. This aligns with about this result, the option, that this feature that Google added a while back. That sometimes they used to show like this page has terms that are not the keyword, right? Like I think they removed this right now, the terms part, but and I think that's part of what we can show also authors or copywriters. So yeah.
Okay.
That's about that.
And the other question?
Can you say it again?
Of course. I'm asking that sometimes the SEOs from around the globe, they tell me that you explain all these things about semantics and they work for English and in a good way, but in my language, I always see a crappy content that ranks at the first. And doesn't Google understand these content, or does Google want to rank these type of content? They ask me. What would you think?
Ranking for example, for myself, I speak Arabic. Ranking in Arabic is much easier than ranking in English, and the quality of content is definitely different. And I don't think Google mastered other languages the same as English. But I mean, at the end of the day, I still, if I'm going to work with another language, I still have to follow or do the right thing the right way. It's not just for ranking, it's also for, the user and making sure, I mean, if you don't have good content, this may also potentially impact your conversions and so on. So I don't see that Google has the same quality in ranking content.
Same understanding. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. Crystal.
Sorry if I can jump in. I think that the internet in English is bigger. There's a lot of content in English. There's a lot of people who are outside of English speaking countries who are making content in English. And so there's a lot there. So I think that in places where there are fewer speakers of a language, that it's still growing and still developing. But I think with the advent and Google in the age of MUM and Google in the age of they've got so many different languages that they're working in now, and they're planning to sort of pull the best content regardless of language in the future. So I think that even if you are making this sandals content now, even if it's working now, I think that in the long run, you'll do yourself more favors by making actually relevant, rich content in whatever language you're doing that you have. And I think sometimes that happens a lot. There people were doing reviews in a certain way for years, and Google's review updates have changed that. So I think sometimes you might be working on borrowed time if you're using that methodology.
Yeah, exactly. That point. It's a great point by Crystal. I think for me in the UK, we often look at the US, because like the stuff that Google rolls out is often rolled out in the US first, because hey, Google's a US company and they speak in English. So it's like if you're working in other languages, yeah, you can kind of game the system still a little bit, because Google in Japanese or whatever hasn't quite caught up yet. But that the kind of English language version is where it's going. That's the direction of travel, right? So if it's not working in English and you're kind of getting away with it in, I don't know, Swahili for now, this is where it's going. So you can get yourself ahead of the game. It's almost like the canary in the cage kind of thing.
Definitely. Actually, Google.
I like that we coined a new term, the sandals content. I really like that.
Sandal?
Yeah, this is here to live.
Okay. So actually, Google also states that from MUM to the Lambda or to the Kelm or any kinds of retrieval augmented language understanding algorithms or all of them, they also state that in semantics, they don't focus on the language. They usually focus on the meaning across the different languages. It is also helpful for them to unite all the data. And if they have more data, it means better algorithms will come. But I guess one of the problems there is that the amount of the documents, because when you have too much documents, it means that actually you can choose in a more free way. For example, in Canada, even if the language is English, which is a language that actually Google understands according to the assumption, but still in the news industry, we see that many duplicate content ranks really well. And in my opinion, especially the main reason for that is there is not that much candidate. It's not like in New York or in Washington, because in Canada there is maybe a less intensity for that. And since the candidate count is lower, it means that quality threshold will be lower too. So maybe because of that, some other region SEOs are luckier than American and UK SEOs, I can tell. So I will ask a question about the TF-IDF. And do you think that it is useful? Do you think that it is logical? Would you think that Google would use it? And would you suggest using it?
I'm going to ask you to explain the acronym for me there, Corey. Are you able to? TFID, you say?
TF-IDF, term frequency, inverse document frequency. Okay. And do you think that it is something useful or something meaningful for Google? Basically, the purpose of the TF-IDF is actually filtering out the contextless words like stop words or like any kinds of, imagine that there is a word, it appears too much, but it is not relevant to the topic or it is not relevant to the context that much, and they try to filter them out. But at the same time, yes, it is a useful methodology for top text classification, but TF-IDF can't be used for understanding the meaning at the same time. But I just wonder, if you would be a Google engineer, for example, just today, would you use it? Would you go to the Googleplex and think that let's use TF-IDF for understanding some documents or ranking or something else?
I mean, to my mind, I mean, I think we all do this when we read content. Like you can, if you're looking up a recipe for chocolate cookies, there will be a lot of that content at the beginning of the recipe. And they'll talk about how they went for a walk on the beach in their sandals and they saw a beautiful bird and blah, 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 blah. 500 word later, then you get to the recipe. The most important thing, the reason why I'm here is because I want to make cookies, and that's why I'm there. So I think there's a lot of waffle. I think sometimes, there's some people that think that SEO, when they think about whether a content is good, they're like, oh, it needs to be 500 words at least. And then people do the thing that we all did in grade school, which is they add in things like, oh, this let's compare and contrast, and they add in extra words and they use, Courier New font to make it longer and all that sort of stuff. And these are things that these are a waste of everyone's time. Sometimes you can have something, sometimes, it could have been a list. Like it could have just been a list. It doesn't have to be like all of that sort of stuff. We don't need to know about that time you went to the beach to get to the cookie recipe. I just need the cookies, please, thank you. And so I think if that helps Google to filter out the nonsense and the gibberish and that thing about the Manchester blah, then I think that I think that can be useful, because I think there's a lot of time wasting content. There's a term I use a lot in SEO is all killer, no filler. Let's get to the chase.
Any other opinion, Sarah? Would you use TF-IDF?
So in general, I'm open to any new way or any technique, but I would always test it, right? And see a pattern, and because it's different and from one vertical to another. And as Crystal mentioned, recipes, for example, all the top recipes, or very common, a lot of people writing recipes, it's a lot of irrelevant stuff till you find the actual thing. So I would definitely test it. I would try it out and see how it works, and try to come up with a pattern and look at the data, that sort of thing. Yeah.
I'll tell you one way I do use this in terms of then like term frequency is then looking for those opportunities to put synonyms and stuff in. Whereas if you get a particularly, Crystal's example earlier with the attorneys reminded me of this. So attorneys are very regimented and legal minded in the way that they write. And so they'll write in a really specific way, which often isn't that accessible. And they'll use really complex legal word over and over and over again. And you're thinking, like, as a non-lawyer, I'm reading this thinking, I didn't understand it the first time, and you've repeated it 15 more times, and it's like, okay, fine, I know this is the keyword you're going for, but it's like, we can do this better. If you're mentioning attorney, you can pull out, you can do some term frequency inverse document for it. You're like, okay, so this is only 500 words. You mentioned the word attorney 50 times. This is a lot. We can change 2 or 3 of these to the word lawyer. Let's have a look at it. And you're the experts and you're the lawyers, but I'm the SEO and I'm telling you this is too much. Let's turn some of these attorneys into lawyers, and let's look at some ways we can restructure this sentence a little bit to put some other synonyms in here. Do we mean attorneys here, or do we mean like, could we, and like, so that it's a way to then improve the content to make it more accessible for people, but then also to then make sure that your content is broader and kind of hits more of those terms that you're after. Like, how many people search for a lawyer? And I understand there's probably going to be some lawyers and attorneys watching this going, they're not the same thing. And I know they're not the same thing, but it's like, for your customers, they're almost synonymous. They're like, I need a lawyer in Miami. Okay, fine. They meant an attorney, but do you want to miss all that customer and all that traffic? Not really. You can explain to them after when they've got on their page that they're different things. But like, this kind of search angle is we're trying to get them in first. Once we've got them, then we can educate them and turn them and convert them into lovely customers that give us their money. But yeah, that's one of the times I use that kind of TFIDF stuff.
And I think that from that to that point, there's also like Google's getting smarter about this. I'm an American living in England, and Google understands that a ladybird and a ladybug are the same entity, right? So if I search for like, why are ladybirds a different color or different colors, they will serve me information about if the content is good, they will serve me information about ladybugs that are a different color. It does not have the word ladybird on the website at all, but they know that the two things are different. And so like, it's important for when you're thinking about, the density or the things and like thinking about like remembering that like Google doesn't need you to be like to say the same thing. And in fact, if you were to look up like in Google Ads, if you look up their keyword research content, their keyword research tool, if you try to look up like ladybirds versus ladybugs, the number will be the same. Google says they're the same. Google isn't differentiating. They're saying they're the same thing because they know it's the same thing. And I don't know what they're called in French or Spanish or Arabic or Russian or whatever. I don't know what they're called in those languages, but I'm sure that I'm sure that they they understand the same things, that they're the same entity. And with regards to like content for thing, if I were to say like, my boot is big, right? In England, that means one thing. In America, that means another thing. So the context of that statement is important, right? If I say, my boot is big and has many feet in it. Those two things mean two different things in two different countries. You're
going to need to explain what the difference is there, Crystal.
A boot is a shoe in America, and a boot is what they call a trunk in England. You call it a boot, and in America you call it a trunk, and in America you call it a boot, and in England you call it a boot as well. And in Canada, we're just talking about boots.
Definitely, it's different. I will ask one more thing. Do you think that there is a kind of relativity there? Let me explain first. For example, when we use the word pharmacy, and this is also relevant to the entities. So in my knowledge, as I know, in United States, the pharmacies can also sell the cosmetics, as much as I know. But when you come to the Europe, it changes a little, because in Europe, the cosmetic products are not sold that much in the European countries, like Netherlands or other areas or countries. So do you think that Google should or would change its language understanding or relevance understanding according to the entities' different meanings, even if the word is same, and also words' main context and main meaning is same too? A pharmacy in US is a pharmacy too, and a pharmacy in Europe is also a pharmacy too. But the thing that they sell, slightly their repository changes. So how would Google approach for this situation, and how would you instruct your authors for these type of changes?
Yeah, I think it's. Oh, sorry, Andrew. Sorry.
You go ahead. Yeah, something to say.
if you want, I can tell the names too, but
I was just going to say, I think it depends. I think it depends. I'll have it. Am I the first one? Am I the first one to say it depends? So yeah, I think it will all depend on the context of the copy, but I think that it's important to make sure that you're covering the content, that your content is covering whatever topic you're talking about thoroughly, and that it's like genuinely of use to users. And I think that if you are explaining, if your content is explaining very clearly like what you offer and what you do, and then I think you'll probably be covered. I think one of the things about natural language processing is it's trying to process natural language. So it's important to make sure that people are covering it clearly. And I think that most of the time you'll as long as when people are writing that that most of the time you should be fine as long as it's thorough and you haven't missed anything out, I suppose.
The only thing I was going to add is that I think we're talking about edge cases here. Like, so if you're a pharmacy in the Netherlands targeting American tourists who think you're going to be selling makeup, that's, majoritively, like if you're a pharmacy in the Netherlands, you're going to be targeting Dutch people. I mean, unless you're in a big tourist town, in a big tourist area, in which case then that's maybe something you need to consider about, like, okay, right, if American tourists are often showing up in your shop going like, why can't I get, cosmetics? Then okay, then you've got a specific problem. But I don't know. I think that's probably more of an edge case. I think context is always important, right? With those kind of things where it's like, if you're talking about, your target audience and you're writing in English, even though you're based in a country that speaks a different language because you're aimed at these kind of tourists and you're looking for people. Like the example is always like, particularly with people in the UK when they go on holiday to the US, and there's lots of cities that have the same name. And so then they also, because they've been cookied, and Google has is personalizing things around Norfolk because you live in Norfolk in the UK, and then there's Norfolk in the US, which is completely different in a different place. And then you're looking for like, well, I want flower delivery because I need flowers in Norfolk for my wife back at home because I want her to have flowers on her birthday, even though I'm over here work. I mean, this is like, we're going to edge cases here kind of stuff. It's a bit like, look, if those are the kind of things that are throwing up an issue for your business, then maybe you need to tackle them. But it's a bit like, as a human, I can work out that when I go like, flowers in Norfolk and it goes, hey, here's one near Denver. And you're like, no, I'm in Norfolk. You just refine your search, right? We've all done that kind of stuff. It's like, you do the research and you get, 50 billion results, and then you add a few more keywords to kind of refine it and to say, no, Google, I mean that Norfolk, the other one. So I think that's, well, I don't know, we're kind of on the edges of edge cases.
I think also Google is using a lot of tools to help with this. So I think that SEOs need to think about the content that's on their site, but they also need to think about their wider digital footprint. So when we were just talking about the Netherlands, the one that popped into my head was coffee shops. If you have a coffee shop in the Netherlands, you will have a completely different experience from a coffee shop in another place, for instance. Now, if you were used to going to coffee shops in the Netherlands to take part in that recreational activity, and you were looking for the same thing in another place, then Google would be able to give you information from Google My Business, for instance, and Google My Business will pull out different reviews and different content for that. So if I was looking for, like, I don't know, vegan pizza in London or something like that, I could get results from Google Business Profile. I think I said Google My Business before. Sorry, I'm showing my age. But if I said if I was looking up vegan pizza in London, even if the website didn't have on their site that they sold vegan pizza, if somebody had left a review saying I had the best vegan pizza ever here, then Google can pull that information and serve that as well. So I think that and I think that the entities and things like Google thinks about entities when they're guiding people to create their Google business profiles as well. And so I think that if you want to rank for those entities, then you should also think of not just what's on your page, but also what's in your wider sort of digital footprint as well.
Yep, I want to add something. I think this is a question of, would a pharmacy in Europe selling cosmetics have the same opportunity to rank for cosmetics as in US, right? Generally, I think potentially no, because there are other factors there in play. Like, would they get backlinks on these on cosmetics, for example? Maybe people would more likely to link to other websites or other businesses that are more known to that. So there are other factors in play as well that may impact this, but just because of the geographical or the way things work in different places, it may potentially have an impact, but there's also other factors that I want to highlight that. Yeah.
Okay, now, so I will ask the next question now. And you mentioned the comments, Crystal, the comments or the experience of the user from a specific business. So do you think that Google uses NLP and NLU, natural language understanding, or sentiment extraction from the comments for using them in the purpose of EAT-related algorithms? So in other words, how many different negative or positive comments would be necessary to change a brand's overall EAT? There is no such a thing like EAT score, but let's say EAT existence or EAT situation for a brand.
I mean, I think it's kind of a chicken and egg thing, because I think that Google gets lots of signals to validate whether or not a business is as expert, authoritative, and trustworthy. Reviews, for instance, are a really good source of this, and businesses that actively say, review us on TripAdvisor, like leave a review, have you reviewed us, like they will get more content because of their reviews. I mean, I use Amazon a lot just for the reviews. There's a lot of times when I won't, I'm not buying from them, I'm buying from someone else, but I'm looking at the reviews. So those reviews help your business to do better with your customers and help build trust and authority, and also help build more digital footprints. So you'll have your TripAdvisor, you'll have your Trustpilot, you'll have your GBP, you'll have Yelp, you'll have all of these different things. So if you're working on that, then that is demonstrating expertise and building trust. And building authority there as well, because you're the top rated business, the top rated business for, I don't know, bicycle tours or something, because you spend all that time building up that authority there. So I think that it's a signal, and Google absolutely looks at reviews. They've been spending a lot of time. They've had a couple of different algorithm updates around reviews. My colleague Morty Oberstein's done a lot of research on the review update in particular, talking about how they were filtering out like a lot of the sort of out of the box, off the shelf, sort of traditional SEO reviews where they're stuffing lots of keywords, to more of the actual like people who are genuinely like, I got this RC car and it's really good, and this is how you use it, and this is how you make it do this, and all that sort of stuff. So genuine actual reviews that are helpful to users. And they're filtering out those things and pushing those things to the top of the funnel, and things. So they absolutely are able to do that. And reviews are a really rich source for entity relationships and things, because people will explain, I use this shampoo on my hair and it was good. So you've got the sentiment, you've got the entity, you've got the things all laid out there. So yeah, I think that it's cyclical, and will help in a number of ways.
Yeah, there's some great examples. So in local SEO, so people like Tim Capper and Claire Carlisle are my kind of local SEO go-to. But there's been some great stuff, so showing where Google is picking up entities from within reviews, particularly in Google My Business Pro or Google Business Profile. But there's some horrific ones as well, where particularly in hotels, which again is like the canary in the cage. If you want to see where like Google Business Profile is going, look at hotels. They're always like on the cutting edge of things that Google is messing with. But there was one where, so you can refine the search for hotel. You look for hotels in a particular city, and you can say it needs to have this facility, this facility. And one of the things was that you can tick a box or check a little search bubble that says concierge, so it has a concierge. And so then the proof that Google had used to show that this hotel over this hotel did have a concierge was a review. And the review then appears in the little search panel, which then says, this hotel has the worst concierge I've ever experienced in my whole life. He was a complete idiot and like ruined my holiday, whatever. But it highlighted the word concierge because it's got a concierge. So it's like it checked the box of like, yes, we recognize the word concierge that you want, and we've got it in this review, so we can prove this hotel has a concierge. It's an awful concierge, but hey, that's not what you said. You didn't say a good concierge. You said, I want a hotel with a concierge. So it's that kind of stuff where Google is picking up those entities. It understands hotel. It understands that a concierge is something that works in a hotel. It's joining those things together and pulling stuff in from reviews that the business hasn't necessarily put themselves. So yeah, if you're not already keeping an eye on your reviews, do, because Google is definitely starting to use them more and more. I mean, the stuff that Crystal touched on with like the product update and stuff as well. I think that was it felt like it was a little bit aimed at those kind of affiliate sites that, you know, don't really ever touch any products. They're just kind of like scraping Amazon and saying, hey, here's the 5 best vacuums under $500. And it's a bit like, you know, clearly when you read it, they've never actually touched those vacuums ever in their entire lives. And so then Google is now trying to tilt things back towards that kind of personal experience. And that, you know, that's where they're kind of understanding the NLU, that they understand in the way that you write or that people write, they can understand that's a personal experience. I use this Hoover and, you know, it wrecked my children's toys. And here's a photo of like the smashed up toy, whatever. That's particularly with images, like, you know, you can get, everybody has the same product image of the Dyson or the Shark or the whatever it is they're selling, and they've all scraped them off Amazon or they've all scraped them off whatever else. If you have a photo of that particular thing that you've used in your house with your smiling children or whatever it is, Google is getting better at understanding, well, that photo doesn't appear anywhere else. So maybe you did have this Hoover, and I understand this vacuum is now in the context of your article, and maybe you genuinely did review it. That's where it feels like it was aimed at for me.
Sarah, do you have a comment?
No, I agree with everything they said. They said everything.
Okay, so my next question actually already came from the comment section, and I am not that good for reading the names, but Badr Eddin Lashini, I guess, he asks a really good question. And he says that, how about the fake reviews? Do you think that, for example, Google can understand if a review is fake? And if it is fake, what would Google do that? And there is one more possibility there. Let's say you have written all of the reviews with an AI system. Can Google detect AI generated content? There are Roberta, for example, AI detectors exist. And if the review comes from a fake review service, how would Google actually react to these spamming attempts? What do you think?
I think, generally speaking, humans have problem detecting fake reviews. So, you know, it's going to be more complicated to Google just at a high level.
Yeah, so it feels to me like, particularly around, so I do a lot of work with Google Business Profile and stuff. There is a whole bunch of like fake reviews and stuff out there. It's pretty rampant. Like, again, so somebody like Jason Brown, if you follow him on Twitter, he pretty much spends his whole time chasing down junk on GBP profiles. And it feels like with the technological power that Google has, there must be something they can do better in this area, right? It's, some of them are so blindingly obviously fake, and you look through these reviews and, like, you know, this person showed up, they created their Google account one day ago, they've only ever written one review, it was for a garage door company, and then like you find on the next garage door company there's somebody with the name exactly the same but one character is different, and they set up their account one day ago and they've only written one review and it was a 5-star review for another garage door company. But how many garage doors is this person buying? It's just like, come on, this is pretty fundamental stuff. Even you know, as a fairly dumb human, I can work it out. And Google, with some like the computing power they have, this must be blindingly obvious to see some of these patterns. So I feel like they could do a lot more in this kind of area, but they're not at the moment for whatever reason. I'm not really sure what the kind of reason behind that is, but I mean, it's not just Google. Like Amazon struggles with this on an enormous basis. You know, Facebook, you know, there's been lots of kind of news articles, particularly in the UK, around like the damage of fake reviews. I feel like that kind of media pressure is going to start to tilt the tech companies to being a bit more, okay, maybe we should do something more about this. But yeah, it feels like they're kind of fiddling at the edges a little bit, and they don't really want to get involved in this kind of messy world, because I think it's like Sarah said, it's really hard. Like sometimes, like, you know, you look into these kind of reviews and they look really fake and they look AI written and it looks like somebody's just copied and pasted it. Turns out it was just some person who's like not really particularly technologically great and their typing wasn't so awesome, and hey, they genuinely did buy the product. So yeah, humans are pretty junk at this kind of stuff.
I think we can look at reviews as the new backlinks. You know, like you can have negative reviews and positive reviews and that sort of thing. And yeah, it does need, there's a lot of space for improvement there.
I think this is also something where the EAT sort of element comes in. So if you're thinking about like, there are some places where the reviews are more trustworthy than others. Like, you know, I think Amazon has a verified purchaser thing, or like I think Trustpilot tries to sort of verify that you actually genuinely purchased from there. Google Merchant also has something that's like a built-in reviewing system there. But I think that like, you know, I think Sarah's right. I've never thought about that before, but that's a really good point. Like they're like the new backlinks, like, you know, you want to make sure that the bulk of them are good and the bulk of them are you know, high quality. But there's going to be some clunkers in there sometimes, probably. And I think that, but I think that having a good strategy where you're covered on a lot of bases and in a lot of different ways is going to be something that will bode well for you.
Okay, so my next question will be a little about the keyword occurrence from the audience, but I will a little rewrite the question to make it more broader. And there is something that called co-occurrence, and also there is something that called already, we all know n-grams, and there are also skip grams. We talk about TFIDF, but there is also a categorical TFIDF and different types of TFIDF formulas and other things too. So I just wonder, do you think that Google uses n-grams or skip grams or co-occurrence of the words? For example, when you look at the co-occurrence of different things, there is another concept called co-occurrence matrix. And when you give an example from the sandals, for example, Crystal, you have used some other words, thematically related words. And it is called, for example, word themes. It is a little, it might be sometimes relative too, but on the web, Google is able to cluster these things. So do you think that Google actually has a different types of phrase lists or co-occurrence possibility lists? And do you think that they are trying to understand context of the document, or let's say macro context and some side minor contexts of the smaller segments by checking these co-occurrences? And if they do that, how would you try to optimize a web page, and how would you try to educate an internal author for that?
So I think Google is doing this, and I think also Google is doing this on the SERP. So certainly in the last little while, I've started seeing that if you put in a super broad search, they will give you like little bubbles at the top that will filter you to something like that will help, that will be a better search. So like if you did shoes, it would be like sandals, trainers, heels, like clogs, snow boots, whatever it is. It will filter you to that because they're just, it's like shoes, what shoes? Give me more to work with. You know, they need more to work with. So they're filtering you to do that. So I think if you're trying to instruct a writer, that's a really good thing to do. Another tool that I've used, and I think it's been around for a little while, but if you want to demonstrate to someone the actual benefit of drawing those relationships and adding in those sort of secondary thematic terms, you know, people talk about keyword clustering, which is I think it's in the same neighborhood of this. But there's a tool called TextRaiser, which is an AI tool for understanding language and relationships. And Corey, I know you get really into the details of how everything is all laid out. For those of us who are less mathematically minded in that regard, I think TextRaiser is a really good tool because you can take a bit of content, and they have a free demo that you can use. You can take a bit of content, you can drop it into their free demo and press go, and they will give you a score, and they'll tell you the relevance of that score. So if you were trying to write something about, we keep talking about these sandals, but if you're trying to write something about these sandals, and what you want to rank for is sandals, and you drop the information into you let's say you have this blog and you pop it into there, and if it's telling you that it's saying like with 75% accuracy that it's sandals, then that's not good. If you edit it and say, you know, beach, vacation, flip-flops, like Javianas, whatever you want to say, if you add that in, and then you can see that the score will change. You can edit it and you can see that the score will change. And I've done this before, and like people are like, oh, that makes sense. I can see that makes sense. So if you have a copywriter who's skeptical about how copy changes can impact them, you know, the machine interpretation of content, then that's a really good tool, really free, really accessible. They can test it themselves as well. And you can also do it. Another one is also Google Sheets. Google Sheets now has that summary tool, which it's a little bit of a tough critic. Like I wrote an article and it was like, oh well, this is an article that's talking about how you can do this and that, but it's not covering everything. And I was like, I thought I covered everything. So I think there's a few tools that you can use that will help you help you see how machines see you when you're writing, and I think that it's worth using those when you're talking to clients and copywriters.
And our dear other speakers, Andrew, Sarah, do you have a comment?
So I think the name that we're kind of skirting around mentioning, because I think it's a bit upsetting to talk about his recent passing, but Bill Slavsky had some great examples around this kind of stuff. The example he always used around the co-occurrence stuff was, if you're talking about a horse, how does Google know which kind of horse you're talking about? Are you talking about the four-legged horse? Are you talking about the gymnastics horse? Are you talking about the hammer and chisel and like a sawhorse? And that kind of co-occurrence of those other words, like, if in the example of the article where you're mentioning horse quite a lot, you also mention hammers and you also mention nails and you also mention, tool bench and all those other kind of things, the co-occurrence of those words, Google's going to go, okay, you probably mean this kind of horse. If in the same article, a different article, you're talking about, like tack and bridle and horseshoes and bits and ponies, you probably mean a different kind of horse. So those kind of things, that's important to, like, the kind of example we talked about earlier with, like, attorneys and lawyers and this kind of stuff. Like my when I talk to authors, it's always like, yes, of course, Google will understand if you say lawyers and attorneys and it knows they're the same thing. But it's like, why wait for Google to work it out for you? If you can spell it out and like feed the machine the stuff that it wants, then that's always a good thing to do. Like, especially if you can do it without kind of changing the context of your article. But one of the tools, so like Crystal was talking about, sort of TechRaiser and stuff. TextRaiser is another good way, is to use this kind of AI tools to look at the images and things that you're using. So again, I've mentioned it before, but Claire Carlisle used a great example in a recent presentation I saw, where one of her customers was uploading an image to their dentist's profile on Google Business Profile. And there was a photo that really looked like a dentist. You could see the blue gloves, and this kind of guy was leaning over this person's mouth. And to you and I and all the human people looking at it, dentist. But for whatever reason, the AI is looking at it and it could see the gloves, and it was thinking white coat, and you could see the list of things that the image with the AI would kind of pick out and say, it's this. I think white coat, maybe sort of 50% dentist. And there was another like image taken from the same photo shoot where the dentist had just lowered their hand so you could see the person's face, and suddenly it was just like, bam, dentist, 90% certainty this is a dentist. So those kind of things. So like the images and the text and stuff that you're using, it really does matter, because Google doesn't have time to pay humans to read through everything. It's going to make some assumptions. So if you can feed it things that it's going to make the right kind of assumptions, that's where you want to be.
Definitely. Sarah, do you have any comment?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. So I actually really love listening all these three great speakers, but at the same time, I am taking some natural warnings from the background, because we are coming to the end of our time today. But I believe that as I believe you also loved listening all these great comments. There is just one minor question from the audience. They asked difference between n-gram and skipgram. Basically, an n-gram, bigram or trigram or 4gram, whatever, it usually follows a kind of continuous phrase line, but skipgram tries to skip one of the words, because most of the time the spammers, they don't think these type of things, and that's why skipgrams sometimes reflect the context and the quality a little better. And there are different skipgrams, like 1 skipgram, 2 skipgram. It determines how many different words you will skip while taking your contextual phrases. And with that said, we will need to finish the session, and I believe it is lovely, and I guess it will be published on YouTube or some other places too, and you will be able to watch that. We have used many really rich terms here, the co-occurrences we use, the NLP or NLG, NLU, and we have talked about EAT and other things. Sometimes it was technical, that's why I just stopped from some sections. And at the same time, we all owe a thank you to the SE Ranking for gathering us here and for presenting all these things. And you can use this QR code at the screen for having all these things. And there are, as I say, there are more than 30 other SEO tools in there. It's not just a rank tracker. There are many other things. I especially suggest you that. And again, it is one of the greatest names for having an SEO SaaS. And thank you. Yeah, also you should check this course too, by the way, definitely. Okay, then. Thanks for watching and listening us, and see you at the next time.
Thank you very much.